So again, good morning. Some of you have seen me speak over the years. No, I don't speak with my shoes on. And I've explained over the years the many reasons for that. It's the same reason I have my kippah on today. The context of it is connected to an act actually of respect. It's not an act of disrespect. And I've also mentioned that some people have discovered I was born in the island of Jamaica. And they have their interpretation because, a lot of kids in Jamaica walk barefoot. And they figure, you take the man out of the island, but not the island out of the man. What I'm going to do is to talk, really just to contextualize some of the things we'll talk about today through some remarks on Gary Tobin and how his work, how he and I got together and worked in these areas. Before I continue, however, I'd like to mention that I also have three wonderful assistants here today. I have Ariella Werden. I always want to say Werden because I studied German, so who's the main assistant for the Center for Afro-Jewish Studies. We had a period where we did not have an assistant for a while, so some of you are trying to contact us and we weren't responding, that's the reason. But now we're back on the ball, and if you'd like at the end to find a way to be connected to us, discuss it with Ariella. We also have Devon Johnson, who has been with us from day one. And Devon has been instrumental in many ways, not only as an intellectual, but also in terms of the way he has really helped us work at our infrastructure. And we have our man on visuals, our tech man, the man who is going to trying to make sure that everything works. If you have a team, you got to have a tech man. And this is Vince Beavers, who's also a doctoral student in philosophy. I just thought in the beginning you could get a sense of the people with whom we're working. Now, Gary Tobin. Well, some of you may have read the literature about Gary Tobin. As you know, he passed away in July 6th of this year. And some of you may have been familiar with everything he's done in terms of, for instance, his work with Birthright with Israel, in addition to the work he has done around critical issues around Jewish demography, as well as issues he has done around race and social justice. But I'd like simply to begin first by just talking about the kind of human being he was. And when I say this, you can have a sense of this in terms of the events around his death. And I'm not going to get into all details there. But he knew he was facing death for a period of, well, when he was first informed, it was a short time, but it went over a period of a year. And you learn a lot about people in terms of how they face that issue. Throughout, he focused on community building, he focused on his family, he was traveling, and he kept the work going. And as I saw him doing this, I just looked and I kept thinking, what a courageous human being. And when I say courage here, I don't mean what it is to face the fears one may have. When I mean courage in an ethical sense of what it is to be a person who, in the face of something that is so ultimate, is always through and through thinking about others. You see? For him, the fundamental issue is how do we continue a project that brings to the forefront the question of human dignity. And so it's in that context, I think, of Gary Tobin. Now, how I met him is very unusual because I met him through one of the speakers today, Walter Isaac. Walter Isaac was at Brown University doing work with me, and he said, oh, there's this meeting going on in San Francisco, and it's going to be a gathering of Jews from all over the world. But at the time, I was tired of meetings. I was giving a lot of talks. I was building a program, and I just went through one of the most vicious, difficult battles you could imagine. Some of you know that I'm on the list of 101 most dangerous professors. And that was because David Horowitz, as you know, particularly his hatred of black professors in the academy, presented a lot of misrepresentations of me that led to death threats, up to 500 hate mail a day with things like, die you pathetic nigger. It was a horrible period, and in the midst of all of those struggles, while doing what I was doing and have to have my mail checked for plastic bombs and all of this, the idea of taking on another meeting. But Walter Isaac said, I think this will be very important. You should go. And so I said, all right, Walter, I will go to San Francisco. When I came to San Francisco, I saw this very active man with a kind of sparkling in his eye, interacting with individuals. And I also have to tell you, when I went to San Francisco, you have to picture this. Now look, I know a thing or two about black Jews. And part of that is connected to looking in the mirror each day. But still, nothing can ever prepare one for the experience of going into a room of 150, sometimes 200 different meetings, Jews of color from all over the world. Just that powerful moment, because you see, it's not only what you see, but it makes you correct your own projections on others. Because as you know, one of the things about any group of people, it's not just Jewish people, any group of people, everybody thinks their version is the version, right? So you go anywhere, it's a know-it-all thing. So it creates a profound moment of humility, because it makes you realize, you may think you know a lot, but there's so much you do not know. And so in the midst of this, I met this wonderful man who was there giving these wonderful speeches. He broke out with these, there were these moments where with his humor, how can I put it? I performed I played drums in the off-Broadway version of this, so I'm very familiar with this. He went Fiddler on the Roof on us. You know what I'm talking about. And I thought, what a beautiful person. Anyway, to make a long story short, when he and I met, it was love at first sight. And what that meant was, okay, because you see, when you're doing community work, when you're doing academic work, you can do a lot of things. There's a way in which you can work with people if they are fundamentally, there's an immediate sense of certain lines. But once you realize you're close to someone in this way, then there's certain things you realize, there's certain projects you can't do together because you are first and foremost friends. You see what I'm saying? And that was, so given that now made the meetings very different because it meant I had work I was doing, some things we'll meet on, but fundamentally we were about each other. And as Capers mentioned, Rabbi Capers Fanei, who will speak later, in one of his dedications to Gary Tobin, it's a realization what happens when you're brothers, okay? Now in this context, one of the things about the Tobins, Gary Tobin is married to Diane Tobin, and Diane Tobin had 3 children, Gary Tobin had 2 children from a prior marriage. Together, I know it sounds Brady Bunch, but together, they got together and then they thought they would like to add a 6th child to the family. But they decided they will adopt. And so they went to an adoption agency, and the representative of the agency said, well, what child do you want? What gender, what race? And they looked and said, what do you mean? And they said, well, if you don't specify, for instance, you want a white girl, a white boy, a Chinese boy, a Chinese girl, if you don't say these things, they'll give you an African-American boy. All right, now when you think about the question of race, that really brings it out. You know, one of the things about American race stuff that we don't often talk about is how race and gender meet. And race and gender, particularly in the United States, really, people always say black, white, but they don't understand. It's really very specific. And the fundamental bogeyman, so to speak, in American consciousness